Shocking moments in the courtroom there in Hawaii with these two. You had Dr. Gerhardt Konig and his wife. She was testifying against him in this alleged murder plot case where the state of Hawaii claims that he tried to throw her off a cliff on her birthday, inject her, and then attack her with a rock. We are going to break down her testimony. It's make or break for the state of Hawaii. And I have a body language expert here to break down her direct and cross-examination. But first, do me a solid, hit the like button, subscribe, maybe share this episode with your friends. Let's bring the true crime family back together. Thanks for being here. Let's get after it and let's talk about that testimony. Bringing into the conversation, we have body language expert, jury consultant, and one of my friends, Susan Constantine. Susan, thank you for being here and talking about this case. It's kind of been ripped from the headlines. Everybody's watching this case in Hawaii.
Yeah, it's a big case over there, and I enjoyed watching the trial. You know, you sent me the video and was able to see inside the courtroom the testimony, and that's what I'm great at. So I'm really excited about sharing with your viewers the things that I saw inside that courtroom.
Okay, so let's start playing some clips here because I want to start with her body language of facing her husband. This is video of her there. She is getting ready to take the stand. She doesn't look over at the defendant. There he is. He's in custody. And then she, takes the oath. What do you see in her body language right there?
Well, when she was first walking in the room, she didn't peer off to him at all, but that's what we call a nonverbal cold shoulder, right? So I'm going to snub you. I'm not even going to make eye contact with you. But then she did that really quick little like this little cordial little smile, but that's because she was looking ahead. That's just something that we do when we are just trying to say hello without actually doing a smile. But she was trying to keep her countenance down and keep her natural affect in control. So when you first saw that was typically what I would see. You're not going to look at the defendant. It would look kind of weird, kind of off if she did.
All right. And then she goes straight into the testimony and straight into answering the question about the incident at hand, the alleged attack by her husband. And it's a three-pronged attack because according to prosecutors, he not only lures her there on this hike, but then he tries to stage it like we're taking a selfie on this very high cliff in a remote area on a hike there in Oahu. And then when that doesn't work, the state alleges that he tries to stab her with some sort of medicine. And then the end result, according to witnesses who testified, is she's attacked. He's on top of her with a rock. So let's play this clip of her testifying to the alleged incident.
So he was then facing me and the cliff, and I walked up to him. And again, everything was normal. I walked up and just kind of like brushed my hands against his shoulders, like kind of like a little hug. Yeah. When I walk up to him, then he grabbed me really forcefully by my upper arms, and he said, "I'm so fucking sick of this shit. Get back over there." And he starts pushing me back towards the cliff.
Grabbing you and pushing you. What did you do?
I was surprised. It felt almost like he was kidding at first, and I was like, "What are you doing?" But he had grabbed me really hard and was moving me. So we kind of wrestled a little bit, and I threw myself onto the ground. He had grabbed me really hard and was moving me. So we kind of wrestled a little bit, and I threw myself onto the ground because there's a lot of trees and shrubs there so that I could hold on.
As you threw yourself to the ground, how did the defendant respond?
Well, he got on top of me, and he was kind of trying to pull me, and we're wrestling, and he ended up straddling me. So he had his legs on either side, kind of across my waist.
On March 24, 2025, how tall were you?
About 5'6".
And how much did you weigh on that day?
About 145 pounds.
Okay, so I'm pausing it right there, Susan. What did you see so far in that account? And there's a little bit more to go.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to establish is her baseline. That's the first thing in Body Language 101. You're looking to see how she's answering the questions. You're looking at, heads, fingers, knees, and toes, but we don't actually see the toes. But I'm looking at her facial expressions, her movements, in her hand gesturing. And so I'm looking for this synchronized movement between her words and her gestures? And are they illustrating what actually occurring right on point, not delayed, but right on point? So that's the main thing you're looking for. When they're off, then the story is off. If the baseline has changed, something has changed. That's rule number one. There's one area where it was a bit concerning for me. And I think what was happening is that what happened, it was cognitive load. So her baseline was fairly consistent. Her gesturing was right on point. Her facial expressions were also exactly what you would expect with the words that she's saying. And then there was a point where she kind of stopped. She kind of paused. She swallowed. You could see this movement in her mouth, which is emotional, just suppressing emotion. At that point, that wasn't completely what happened. So why am I saying that? Is she being deceptive? Not necessarily, but it's off from the baseline. So when you look at the very first part, the baseline was really consistent. The story, the production of the story was very consistent. And all of a sudden there was a pause, right? When there's a pause, there's a reason why there's a pause. If there's a shift, there's a reason for a shift. She looks down, closes her eyes. So she does a eye closure, a long, fairly eye closure. And then she swallows and she kind of pauses and hesitates a little bit. So what is that saying? In body language, we don't automatically just, hey, the person wasn't telling the truth, because I think she was telling the truth. But what that's telling me is that she is trying to recall a story that occurred, but she's also throwing herself into present tense as she recalls it then. So instead of going back into back then, recalling it and showing the emotion she felt back then, she's actually telling the story in present tense. She's explaining it in past tense, but you could see she was trying to relive it in present tense. And that was what was causing that shift in her behavior. Doesn't mean that it's deceptive, but it did tell me that she was trying to recall every little moment and then tell the story. And that created cognitive load. And that's why you saw the hesitations and the other clues along with it.
That's fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to play the rest of this. And what should we be watching for in her movements? And she seems laser focused on the questioner, the prosecutor, rather than veering over, which would be to her right, her husband's table.
What you should be looking at, and this is what I teach every one of my attorneys when I'm teaching. You must determine the baseline. We've already done that, right? So now what we're looking for is there a shift in her movements? Could it be eye movements or who she's looking at? We have to consider who's over there. We don't see the camera. We don't know who is pointed, who she's actually peering at. But if they shift, something's caught her attention. What was it? So then we could consider, okay, well, that was calls from a camera person, or that was calls from a prosecutor. Maybe it was somebody that was out in the gallery that was, looked at her strangely. I don't know. But what I look for is any sort of change and then tie it to the content. What was the probe? What was the question? So anytime there was a probe, we called it a stimulus. What was the stimulus that created that reaction at that exact moment? So I'm looking for, if a person was being deceptive, the probe or the question, you would see 3 indicators that would pop in there within 7 seconds of that question. So that is really important. There's a 7-second window of where the person realizes, if they're being deceptive, what the question was. And then about one half of a second, when they realize how they're presenting themselves, they then manage it. And when they do that, we're looking for leakages, 3 indicators, and at least 2 of their channels of communication within 7 seconds of that question. That's where I catch liars all the time. We haven't seen that here. We have not seen that here. She has maintained the same countenance. She's been fairly, streamlined. There's not really very many blips or changes, and I did not see any clusters of deception.
All right, let's continue to watch it.
And on that date, how tall was the defendant?
About 5'10",
And how much did he weigh?
maybe 165 pounds.
Okay, and then you said straddling. Can you describe what that looked like for us?
Sure. I'm laying on my,
I'm going to pause it really quick because I
Yeah.
noticed that little facial tick and you wrote something down.
Yeah, I did. Okay. So we're now when we're talking about, see, there was a shift, right? So you're going in, okay, what was the question? She wasn't really quite sure because that's when she goes, oh, well, kind of roundabout. So that's what that was right there. It says uncertainty. So she was giving a description, a weight, height, but she wasn't actually confirming it because there was a slight what do you call discrepancy with what he actually is. So he could have been an inch taller, 10
Right.
pounds heavier. She wasn't really certain. Is that still something to be concerned about? No, because I'm not seeing a fear response. I'm not seeing a psychophysiology response, which is a gulp or something like that. And I'm not seeing an inconsistent gesture. I'm not seeing head movements, shaking yes when it's no. I'm not seeing any inconsistency. So that was telling me that she's like, not really quite sure.
Got it.
back, and he's on top of me with kind of like one leg on either side across my waist, facing me. So he was first trying to pull me, try to get me closer to the cliff. And again, I could kind of hold on to the roots and stuff that were around us. And then he had a backpack that he was hiking with. And he, like I said, he's on top of me, and he had a syringe in his hand. And he says, hold still. And I see the syringe, and I just kind of like bat it away from us both.
Okay. When you first saw that syringe in his hand, did you actually see where it came from?
I didn't see where it came from, no. Kind of holding me down with his right hand. And I'm screaming and I'm saying, what the fuck are you doing? Get off me. And he's saying like, fuck you, you're done. I'm so sick of your shit. I'm so done with you. And I'm trying to kind of protect myself and get out of there. But also he's gripping his hand closed really hard. And there's a vial in his hand. So I was trying to pry his hand open so I could grab that vial out.
Okay. Which hand did you see the vial in?
The vial was in his right hand.
Okay. And did you actually get to see the entire vial?
No.
Okay. What part of it did you see?
I could see pieces of it because I'm trying to like pry his fingers off of it so that I can grab it and throw it.
Were you able to open his hand that was holding the vial?
Not enough to get the vial away.
All right. You mentioned the defendant was saying some things. Can you tell us what you remember?
Okay. So what did you notice with that bit of testimony? And then I want to get your thoughts on what you observed with this guy.
Okay. Well, when there was a lot going on there too. So I was looking at her gesturing. Was it consistent? Yes. And one of the things that she's talking about was kind of trying to pry his hands apart so she could remove whatever it was that was in his hand. And the thing is, what she did, she gave a visual descriptor. She said there was a blue little piece to it. Usually when people are lying, they're not going to give you that much information. The fact that it came so spontaneous, it wasn't what we call a spontaneous reproduction, like a false reproduction. It was very seamless. So she was telling you exactly what had happened. The other thing is that she slapped it away, right? So she's telling his hand is over here, right? It's right hand. And then if he had it and he's on top of it, she's slapping it away. The direction and the movement was congruent with swiping it away. So that's the things that I'm looking for. The other thing is I want to bring attention to, Matt, is we don't see a lot of, emotion coming from her, right? So let me tell you why that's happening. When you have told the story many, many times over and over and over again with meeting with police officers and investigators, and then you're dealing with your attorney, there is a part of you that kind of detaches from the emotion of what happens, and then you're just telling the story. If they were to have interviewed her right after it occurred, you would have seen a lot of eyebrow flashes. You would have seen some fear responses. You would have seen more demonstrative gesturing. But this is the thing is about body language that you have to remember. We cannot conclude until we know all of the information. You have to consider she's been telling the story over and over again. She's not rehearsing it. It is spontaneous, but she has somewhat detached from it because I can tell you she's not showing the emotion in her forehead. Does that make
That's
sense?
interesting. That's fascinating. And it's something that came up in the chat when we were watching it together live on this channel. A lot of people were saying she's really not showing much emotion. And I was kind of explaining the process. Well, it's a lengthy process, even though it's been a year, because she testified on the anniversary of the alleged attack. But as you know, like there's the police reports, there's what you're telling to witnesses, then what you're telling in the depositions, then what you're telling in the pretrial. So I love the fact that you brought that up. Okay, so now I'm going to play this. There's audio to it because she's still testifying, but I'll pause it afterwards. But it's a little bit of a camera shot of the defendant during her testimony.
He said as he was on top of you?
Yeah. I'm screaming and he's telling me, shut the fuck up. Nobody's going to hear you out here. Nobody's coming to save you. And I'm saying, like, you can't do this. Everyone knows we're on a hike.
Okay, so I'm pausing it right there. So part of his defense has been that he was claiming that, she was trying to hurt him, and that's why he grabbed the rock. I'm assuming that that's what we're going to hear is a self-defense defense in this case. But anyways, what'd you notice?
Well, first of all, you didn't see him shaking his head no, that he was in disagreement. That was the first thing, right? There was no disagreement. He's just kind of stoic. The other thing is that he had a slight little fear response because you could see him kind of swallow right then when she had said that. That is also like, oh, here comes some bad news, and he was being prepared for it, and we tend to swallow when we do that. Also, if you would have went back into that piece, you would have seen all of a sudden his forehead was showing a lot of tension. Right? You would have seen that muscles and the tightness of a brow. That is suppressed anger. So when we're seeing that, pay attention, fear response, tension is being repressed, and he's not making eye contact with her. He's not shaking his head no, so he's not denying it.
All right. Well, let's move on to this. I believe this is where she's talking about her injuries.
Ongoing physical therapy for vertigo and for
Pause it. There we go.
just kind of fatigue and being able to sit at the computer and do work on my computer screen all day. So I did physical therapy to kind of strengthen the ability to do that.
How long before you were fully recovered, just in terms of able to work a normal work day?
Maybe between 2 and 3 months.
Do you have any visible long-term effects from the injuries from March 24, 2025?
Oh, yes, I have scarring on my scalp and my face.
And Arielle, could you show everybody in the courtroom the scar on your scalp?
Sure.
And I want the record to reflect.
All right, so let's just pause it right there, Susan, because how effective is that for the jury to see, and the way that she showed it, and clearly there is damage to herself and scarring, and the jury is right there in the box, very close to her.
Yeah, it was a great move for the defense. I mean, for the state, for sure, because when you're seeing something visual and actual, it's like I've worked on a lot of high profile cases when it comes to personal injury. We want to show what happened to our client, whether they've lost a limb or what have you. We want to show that, and there was really truly a big gap there. The other thing is that what I would like for you to know, or all of your viewers to know, is that you could see that there was a change in her vocal pitch, right? Her vocal pitch dropped. She also had a long eye closure. And what that was is that I'm reliving that emotional part. Her head went down slightly. That's kinesthetic. When you are reliving or you're experiencing pain or, anguish, you will look down. And then that's coupled with, and why I know that's what it is, because her voice tone dropped. And then also her cadence in her vocal tone changed. And also on top of that, she showed genuine sadness. You could see it in her forehead. You could see her facial expressions depleted somewhat. So that was a cluster, not in deception, but the cluster was telling me that was a true experience.
Yeah, and very sad, and must be very traumatic to go through. Let's move on to when she's talking about a guy named Jeff
You
Miller.
understood Mr. Miller was also married, yes?
Yes,
You were married at the time, yes?
that's right.
You indicated under oath today that after the discovery of these communications with you and Mr. Miller, you and Gerhardt would refer what had happened between the two of you. You would refer to it as an emotional affair, correct?
This is
That's
Cross.
right.
All right. In fact, there were times in communications where he referred to it as a secret affair, yes?
When you say he, you mean Gerhardt?
Yes.
I don't recall, but potentially.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. And in fact, in the counseling sessions that you guys had, it was whatever was going on with Mr. Miller was referred to as emotional infidelity at times, yes?
As far as I can recall, yes.
Okay. Now, emotional affair, secret affair, emotional infidelity. When you were interviewed by the detective in this case, following this incident we're all talking about, you were asked by the detective about your relationship with Mr. Miller, yes?
Yes, sir.
And you understood that he was investigating this case and he expected you to be honest and truthful, correct?
That's right.
And he asked you whether or not you had an affair with Mr. Miller, and your response to the detective was no, that you didn't have an affair, correct?
Based on,
My question, ma'am, is was your answer to his question, when he asked you a very specific question, did you have an affair? Your answer with Mr. Miller, your answer was no, correct?
that's correct.
You described it to the detective simply as some flirty text messages with a coworker, correct?
That's what it was, sir.
That's what it was, according to you, right?
That's right.
Confronting you and saying you engaged in a secret affair. You said, I learned how stupid it was, and I know how to make sure it doesn't happen again, correct?
It felt like an affair to Gerhardt, and that's how we were treating it in our marriage.
Ma'am, can you listen to my question?
Sure.
Okay, my question is about the text message. Isn't it true in a text message, I'm not asking you why you said what you said, in a text message, when Gerhardt accused you of engaging and continuing an elaborate secret affair, your response was, if anything, I learned how stupid it was this time and know how to make sure it doesn't happen again. My only question is, do you recall sending that response to him when he accused you of being in a secret affair?
Yes.
Okay, Susan. What's
Yeah.
your takeaways from the cross? And she was questioned about this early on in direct, but it was just really just kind of like brushing over. She was asked, did you have sex with him? Did you have an affair? She said, no, he was just a coworker. So in cross, she's asked about it again. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, so there was a lot of things that I saw there too, Matt. There's a difference in the tonality, of course, with when she's being crossed, right? There's a very short, a little sharper tonality is a little bit different there. What we see oftentimes when you have cross, because the defendant gets a little bit defensive, but she really handles it really quite well. She answers it very succinctly. No, no, yes, yes, no. And she admits. So there's not this, she's not trying to add her own narrative or change it. Her chin is up a little bit. So she's feeling very confident in how she's answering it. I'm also noticing that I'm watching her eyelids and her blink rate to seeing if it was going to increase. If she were to deviate from the truth, I would see a rapid like this compared to a more concentration where the eyelids are not moving. So when she's paying attention, she's trying to listen to the questions. You can see the eyelids stop, they focus, they don't blink, and then she will answer, and then you'll see just a natural, normal blink rate. What I would be looking for is if she were to deviate from the truth or to spin it in another direction, you would see cognitive load, which would have been a rapid eye blinking, and it didn't happen.
So
do you like my sound effects too, by the
I do.
way?
I really like them. I'm going to have to add them. So How is she coming across so far with this jury? We're at the beginning of the cross-examination. Those were pretty much the highlights from the direct. What kind of grade would you give her so far?
I think she's about a B plus. I think she's done really well. I think she's maintained her countenance. She's comes across very credible and truthful. She's not harsh or arrogant. She's not combative. None of those things. She's not showing any sort of disgust or contempt, which is things that I would have noticed in the tone or in her facial expression. We talked a lot about that. I'm also looking at her shoulder shrugging. If she doesn't know something, she'll shrug, which is consistent. But when the jury is seeing that, they're seeing a girl. She's kind of like the girl next door, right? She's not overdone or underdone. She appears very soft. She doesn't appear hard or like someone that is more sexually deviant, so to speak, or you don't see any of that. And then she says, she admits, when you're starting to admit that, yes, we had a relationship, it was an emotional relationship. I think that there's women on that jury that would feel the same way, that they might have someone that they console in, they talk to. Maybe they can't talk to their husbands, but they have a really good friend and they build that emotional relationship, good, bad, or indifferent, but it's not sexual. And I believe it wasn't sexual.
Okay.
And I think the jury will buy that it was not anything more than an emotional relationship.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, she's not on trial here either, right?
No.
And you're exactly right. But they have to try to make her appear untruthful to help their case because it's a he said, she said somewhat. All right. So the other big question is premeditation and whether or not Dr. Konig had premeditated early on planning this trip because they had never been to the island of Oahu. They live in Hawaii, but she was just like saying, oh, I was interested in going. And then he invites her for her birthday trip and the alleged attack happens on her birthday. Well, here she is talking about whose idea was it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned the hike, and I think you said that you only learned about the hike the night before once you were already on the trip. Is that right?
About which specific hike we went on.
Okay. But you knew you were going to go on a hike, right?
We didn't have, aside from having planned to do the spa and shop around, a hike was kind of up in the air. I don't know that we had, before leaving Maui, definitively settled on going on a hike, sir.
Yeah. But the concept of going on a hike came up. That's why you brought stuff, shoes and clothes to go hiking, right?
Yes, like I said.
Yeah.
All right. So what was your takeaway with that?
Okay, so, we're going to be talking about, do we think this was premeditated or not? And,
Which could happen in a split second, right? So, I mean, whether or not he decided that on another island, that's a whole nother discussion, but yeah.
Right. So I think that she was planning on doing this hike with him. She had all this other stuff that was with her. But again, her responses were genuine. They were not like that she was trying to create some sort of other narrative. I didn't see that. And she'd say we went on a hike and it was kind of up in the air. That was kind of like we're just kind of going with the flow. And who doesn't do that? What's this? I don't interpret this was a super planned out from her, that this was, I'm bringing all the gear. We're going to go on this big hike. It was kind of like, it would be fun to go do. We didn't really plan it. It wasn't like something that was set in stone, but I'm up for it, So that's exactly how it appeared, more casual. It wasn't, you're jumping on a, long hike and you're going to be sleeping in a, in a tent or something on the cliff of a mountain, right?
Right.
She didn't have all the gear for that. So I thought she was very believable. I think the jury is going to find that she's believable. And I think, Matt, when this comes right down to it, the fact that he had this backpack, I don't know whether, because I don't know enough about that case, if they ever did recover the vial or any of that sort of thing. But we have seen over and over again these types of cases. They go hiking, the person is kicked off or pushed off the cliff, and oh my goodness, they got too close to the edge, right? I think that most people are going to go, this smells like a little fishy to me. If it quacks like a smell or looks like a duck, it's a duck. And I think that people are going to put two and two together that he planned this thing. It could have been a last minute opportunity that came about because she decided she wanted to go on the hike. But we've seen this happen over and over again, covering this together on a lot of these trials, Matt. This is not
Yeah.
new.
No,
This scenario is not new.
No, it's not new. And sadly, we talk about it sometimes too much of things like this. But the last clip that I have also goes to the defense case. So they're saying that there was a breakdown in the relationship. They blame her because of her alleged affair, whether it's emotional or not. And then that they weren't getting along. And then they try to patch things up. They go on this hike, and her interpretation of who planned it, that was in question according to, that's what they were going for, right? And then the final thing is that she wanted to separate from him anyway and plan a divorce, which is the reason why she filed for separation. But also, she may be going after some sort of money or something because she asked her doctors to change her diagnoses. So, maybe all of this is playing in. Maybe she's making up this story. I think that that's where the defense has to go with this, or what they were trying to, but I'm going to get your reaction to this clip.
Isn't it true you emailed Dr. Yun? Hi, Dr. Yun, on April 1st, 10 a.m., 10:03 a.m. Would you mind adding either traumatic brain injury or concussion to the diagnosis notes from my appointment on March 31st? I want to make sure the documentation is consistent between my care at Queens and back on Maui. Do you remember emailing that to your primary care physician on April 1st, about a week after this incident?
Yes, sir.
She had not included that on her diagnosis list after your visit, correct? Traumatic brain injury or concussion, correct?
Correct. That's the
I'm
purpose of
sorry,
the
I apologize. She had not added traumatic brain injury to her diagnosis list, correct?
for her notes for the 31st. That's correct.
You had an attorney by March 27th, correct?
Yes, sir.
April 1st, emailing your doctor saying, can you please add traumatic brain injury to my diagnosis, correct?
Correction, rule of completeness.
Partially what you emailed your doctor was, can you add traumatic brain injury to my diagnosis? Yes? Okay, I'll read the whole email again. You said to your doctor, would you mind adding either traumatic brain injury or concussion to the diagnosis note from my appointment on March 31st? I want to make sure the documentation is consistent between my care at Queens and back here on Maui. That's what you told her, right? That's what you emailed her, right?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that nowhere in your Queens records does it ever say traumatic brain injury?
Okay, like in my analysis of all of that, I was just like, well, that could be for a number of reasons, right? I mean, maybe she was diagnosed later on, or maybe she needs it for an insurance claim, or maybe she just needs it for a workman's comp. But, to me, that didn't seem unusual. But I think that they were just trying to go to the point of you're after money or you're after for a separation to begin with. But overall, from that, how did she come across to the jury?
Well, at this point, you could see a little bit of shift in her demeanor. So you could see one shoulder pop down and she kind of pulled away. So if you went back and you looked at that, there was a shift in her posture. And when you see that, oftentimes when you don't like somebody, you will shift your body language towards the exit door or away. So she did that here. So what did that mean? She also had this slightly pressed lips, like this was concealed. And what happens is that she was annoyed. She was annoyed by the question. She was annoyed by him. She probably didn't like him at that moment. That's why her body language shifted away, kind of gave him the cold shoulder. And then you could also see some neck strain that was going on here. So that was a very uncomfortable point for her. She probably knew it was coming up. He was going to ask those questions. She knew that they were going to tie this together. That she was already prepared for it. She was already annoyed by it and didn't like the fact that she brought it up, but you could actually see it in her body language. It's those really tiny little shifts, and those tiny little shifts will tell you a different story. So What does that all mean? I'm going to go back to the experts. What does the evidence say? Is that true? What was the timing of it? What was the wording of it? I want to analyze that language because he's the defense attorney is going to present it in a way that's going to what? Make their client look better, to make it look like that this was all, kind of like the grand plan and that she was looking to get more money out of it. And again, Matt, it's kind of like the same playbook over again. It's the same playbook.
I know. I don't think it's going to go well for him, but I do project or suspect that he's going to have to testify. What do you think?
I think it would be good for him if he is going to be a really good liar. If he's a good liar, he might be able to pull it off, gain some sympathy. I don't know, because, as you know, Matt, all we need is one juror to go, some guy that's sitting on the jury going, yeah, I know a woman like that. She did, it's really interesting when you look at the jury dynamics, and it has a lot to do with what their personal experiences are. And are they projecting some things that they've experienced and they see some similar attributes, or they try to put the pieces together? And here's the other thing is that juries are trying to determine who's telling the truth without any sort of trained skill.
That's true, right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's why the closing arguments are always so important, because, the prosecutor and the defense attorney wants that to be the roadmap to their point of view.
Yep.
Susan Constantine, if he does take the stand, will you come back on the program?
I would love to, my friend.
All right. And we can see you at CrimeCon this year in Las Vegas. I'll be there as well, so the True Crime fam can get back together. Where else can we find you?
Well, they can go to my website at susanconstantine.com. And I'm also training a course here coming up May 7th on how to spot a liar in 7 seconds, or lessons for attorneys and mediators and judges.
This is fascinating. I always love talking to you. Jury consultant, body language expert, author, and even more than that, a friend of the True Crime family. Yes. Susan Constantine, thank you so much. And thank you for being a part of the conversation.
My pleasure.
So we'll have to see what the jury decides in all of this, but be sure to hit subscribe, like, and tell your friends about the channel. We'll see you next time.